What's going on, guys? I hope everybody had a great holiday season this year. I wanted to share a quick story that I've had in my younger years whenever I first got into pellet stoves, and hopefully you guys can get some good information out of this and it helps someone out. Even if it only helps one person, to me it's totally worth it, just because the story is your typical classic story of just someone young being dumb, struggling. So, my girlfriend and I bought our first house when we were in our early 20s. To say it was a fixer-upper would be kind of an understatement. So, we went through the home inspection. The home inspector clicked the oil furnace on. It's a forced air oil furnace. He clicked it on. We listened. We heard it kick on and start to blow, and then he shut it off, and we kept going through the rest of the home inspection. So, this is in September, mind you. So everything went good. We put a good chunk of money down on the house that we had saved up for closing costs, things of that nature. So we're already moving in kind of on a budget. The season started to get a little bit colder. We had to turn the oil furnace on for the first time, probably late October. And it worked good for a couple of weeks. And then all of a sudden we started getting like a kerosene smell through the heater vents. And it set my O2 detector off, so we had to shut that off immediately. In the middle of the night, mind you. When it was kind of cold out, it was probably down in the 40s. It wasn't anything that was going to freeze the pipes or anything, but we just kind of toughed it out for the rest of the night. I went to work that next morning, and while I was at work, I was like, I don't know how to fix an oil furnace with that issue, because I knew more than likely it was the heat exchanger that had gone bad. So everything in the combustion chamber was leaking up through the heat exchanger, going into the pipes, the vents, everything else that we had through the house. I knew the furnace was shot at that point. I'm young and dumb, but I knew that much. I've been around oil furnaces a long time, and I knew that one was shot. There's no fixing that one. That thing was ancient anyway. Our house was over 100 years old. The oil furnace, I looked on the date, it was actually 5 years older than I was at the time. So it had a good lifespan, but it was time to go. So I call up a tech that we had here local, and he came over and looked at it. Sure enough, it was shot. So he gave me a price on a new one. The price quote at the time, now keep in mind this was almost 10 years ago, was $3,500 for the furnace itself, plus installation, labor, anything that he had to do to connect it that was different than ours. I mean, we're looking at probably $4,800 till it was all said and done. And we just didn't have that kind of money. So I was like, well, what do we do here? We're in kind of a tough spot. So I was like, well, let's go with what I know. I know pellet stoves. I've been around them my whole life. My grandparents had one. I know more about them. I've helped them take care of theirs. We've done maintenance to it over time, this and that. So I was like, all right, let me get on Facebook Marketplace. And sure enough, I did that day. And I found one, well, it was like an hour and a half away from where we lived. And it was $500. It was used, well used. I mean, it was a few years old. But I said, you know what? It's in my price range. It's the only thing I could find at the time. At the time, it was starting to get colder, so everybody's buying them up. So I just took what I could get at the time. Fast forward, a couple days later, I have it installed. Thankfully, the weather wasn't bad, so no pipes froze up in the house. We had to bundle up, put sweatshirt on, coats, everything we could do to keep warm in the house until I got this thing hooked up. So I get it hooked up, I get it up and running. For the first couple of weeks, it was amazing. The hopper held one bag of pellets, so like every 24 hours I was dumping a new bag in. It was like everything I could have dreamed of. Everything worked perfectly. Well, probably a month and a half in, all of a sudden, 4 o'clock in the morning I wake up and it's freezing inside the house. At this point, it's almost Christmas time. The temperatures here in Pennsylvania dropped significantly. It's freezing out every night. I mean, we were just in a pickle. I'm like, what is going on? I come down to the pellet stove, and I look at it, and the red light's on. I'm like, well, it tried to kick on. Is it out of pellets? What's going on here? I look at it. I look at the menu board, or the little circuit board on the side, and it says E2 error code, failure to ignite pellets in the pot, in the burn pot. And I'm like, well, what the heck's that all about? So I turned it on. I'm all groggy because it's so early in the morning. I turned it on, I watched it. Sure enough, the burn pot fills up with pellets, and it starts to overflow, and it kicks off again. And I'm like, wow, okay, so the igniter's bad. Obviously, being 4 o'clock in the morning, you're not going to make a phone call and have an igniter there. So I'm scrambling at this point. I'm like, what do you do? So I took my hand, and I scooped out a lot of the pellets in the burn pot. And the only thing I knew to get that thing going was, at the time, I had a torch, actually the same one is right here. I had MAP gas hooked to it because I was doing some plumbing in the house. So I took a torch, I opened up the door, stuck the torch in there, and I closed the door as much as I could to kind of keep the smoke from coming in the house. I lit it, and I just waited for a little bit until I got the fire going in the pot before I turned the stove on. I reset it, turned it back on it, and eventually I got the fire going. But that was like, well, I can't do this every time the pellet stove shuts off. There's got to be a better way. So sure enough, my stove that I got was an off-brand stove. You couldn't get parts for it. It was impossible. I tried a local supplier up near me. I went to big box stores. I tried everything I could. My last option, I actually found one. It was on eBay. It shipped from China. It was a 3 to 4 week lead time until I would even get the part in the States. And it's already almost Christmas. So I was like, all right, what do we do here? So a lot of Google searching later, I eventually came across pellet stove ignition fuel. It was like $13 for a gel that basically came in a container this size, $13. I'd have to use it every time I had to light the stove. Up to this point, I've been just letting the stove run almost 24/7 on low, which isn't really great for the stove, but I didn't really have any other options at the point. So I went to my local big box store, which just happened to be a Lowe's at that point in time, and I got some pellet stove ignition gel, and I put that in there, and it wasn't much better than using my torch, but it worked pretty decent. So I was like, well, if I spend $13 on this little tube every time, for the next month, I'm going to spend a lot of money here. So what I ended up doing was, it's like, there has to be something cheaper that I could use that's in my home already that I could ignite this with. So I ended up doing some more Google searching. I ended up finding out that hand sanitizer, just regular old hand sanitizers, cheap as all can be, and especially because COVID happened, they're pretty much just giving this stuff away now. There's such an abundance of hand sanitizer out there. I ended up getting this for like $1.70, something like that, after tax for this whole container. And it's basically, it's a real close recipe to what the pellet stove gel is. The gel is a little bit thicker, but oh well, right? So this actually worked for me. If you have the lower alcohol content hand sanitizer gels, that they won't work very well. The thing I used here during that time was I used 91% isopropyl alcohol, and what you do is you just mix it up. So what I do here, I just get a ketchup or mustard dispenser. You can get these in any store, any kitchen area. What you do is you just put a bunch of hand sanitizer in here, mix it up with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol. This one wasn't open yet. You just put a little bit in there, not a whole lot, just enough to make it burn a little bit better. Put the cap on, shake it up, mix it up, and there you go. Pretty much the same thing, a fraction of the cost. It's going to light faster. It won't burn as long, but it'll burn long enough for you to get your pellet stove going in a pinch. So here I have, just for demonstration purposes, I have little jack stands because I'm into RC cars and scaling and all that sort of thing. So I just happen to have these jack stands here. So just to give you a brief demonstration of how this works. So let's say you dump some pellets in your burn pot. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. You're out of options at this point. You're not calling someone over in an emergency. You're not getting anyone there. Put a little bit of this in there. And the reason I use these is because when you're in your stove working with the door open, this lets you pinpoint where you're putting the fuel at. It just makes your life a lot easier than trying to fit a big sanitizer bottle in there. That's just too cumbersome. So basically all you do, you just take your favorite lighter, candle lighter, cigarette lighter, whatever, doesn't matter, get it to light, and it takes off immediately. Like the gel portion of it keeps it burning longer. You can't really see it burning now, but it's burning. Oh yeah, it's nice and hot. So once the pellet starts taking off, that burns for at least 3 or 4 minutes. That'll get your stove lit. There's nothing else to really do. You can't really see that on camera. Oh, there it goes. There's the flame. So the alcohol burns. You don't see the flame, but you can feel the heat. Now, hopefully, you can see this. That took off on its own. I thought maybe it went out. I was going to light it with this, but sure enough, it took off. So basically, you can do this, put it in there, just let it go for a couple of minutes until you get good flames in there, and then you turn your stove on. It'll start your combustion fan and the draw fan that goes out your chimney. And then once you get those going, this will kick up because it's getting oxygen from underneath, and then you can shut the door. I don't want my fire alarm going off up above me here, but you get the idea. So this is what I found that works out good in a pinch. Hand sanitizer and isopropyl alcohol. Mix them up. It's way cheaper. You usually, most people have this stuff in their home anyway, so it's a cheap, easy, temporary fix for an igniter that goes out. And in my situation, like I said, it was easily 3 to 4 week lead time until I got the igniter. I ended up getting the right part for it, but it took me about 5 weeks. So lead time was just to get it in the States. It took me another 2 weeks after that to get my igniter. I got the part installed. Everything was back to normal. But I wanted to share this just because if someone else is in that situation, and normally it's a dire situation, because that night I told my girlfriend, I said, hey, what's the temperature outside? We had an outside thermometer right outside our back door. And she's like, there isn't a temperature outside. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, it is 0 degrees outside. That's why it feels so cold in here. So we got through, we survived. But if any of you guys are in a pinch like that, hopefully this helps you out. I was young and dumb, didn't know any better. I panicked. We survived. But the point is, there are things in your home, because especially since COVID, most of you guys have something like this in your home already, whether it be in the small little packages or something big like that. Most everybody has hand sanitizer on them or in their home somewhere. They're practically giving that stuff away now ever since COVID happened. But that's one thing I wanted to share with you guys today. Hopefully it helps someone out. Even if it only helps one person, to me that means everything. And you guys that have stoves that don't have automatic igniters in them, this is a quick, easy way to save you some bucks on that too. So hopefully you guys learned something today. You enjoyed my story. It's just a story about being young and dumb and trying to survive. That's how it goes. But until next time, you guys take care. We'll catch you on the next one.